for a real crappy block here because I want to have the relatively hard piece of wood if I can. This is kind of a, well, it's not going to be kind, it's going to be the focal point of the plane. And I really want to have all the angles and all the ribs and riblets. Talked to Midgley today, and what we're going to try to do maybe is make the mold in two different pieces so that it'll join together when you slide the canopy closed or stay open when you leave it open. So hopefully, well, the first step in anything is let's get it roughed out. Let's look for a block and get it roughed out, even a little bit oversized. See, this is why it's real important to have books. Yeah, I can get it from this angle. These angles of the ribs and everything are critical. And I can also get a lot of the details that are going to be inside here to make them prototypical. Now, just one other idea, if we ever make another Spitfire, we can make that piece of the canopy slide back. And I'm sorry now I didn't do it. Even though we did have a concourse winner without it, with it, it would have even been more special. And that's one of the nice things about the Spit. This canopy, when it slides back, this part is flat and then it tapers up. It's kind of an unusual shape. Now that's another thing I never even thought of. I'll be able to, well, assuming I get this done, I'm not all hot air. I get this finished, I can fly with the model with the cockpit open or with the cockpit shut, and I'll definitely try to engineer it up that I can fly both ways, or fly with the pilot in or the pilot out, assuming George doesn't make a pilot that stays in. Be able to take the pilot in and out. So this is what I'm going to try to engineer up, is that the cockpit, the canopy mold is in two pieces. The front piece will be one and the back piece will be the second part. And when they slide in, it'll be like a tongue and groove. Be interesting to see, just another thought, interesting to see if the model's going to fly better with the cockpit open. Say in a wind it'll control whip up. Boy, can you imagine a controversy? No more tuned pipes. You open a cockpit to control whip up. Oh man, I can hear it now. Yeah, that is. This is the part, I'm just trying to get this in my head straight. It's this flat angle here, and then it goes up, and this back part will have the contour of the fuselage in it. Now, I've been looking through my blocks. I haven't really found one that's appropriate here, but I'm going to try to laminate one together. I just want to make a rough, maybe I'll just get this roughed out tonight. There's not much time left. Get this roughed out so I can start getting a picture in my mind's eye of how this is going to be. Now, as I sometimes try to do here, I just look at the picture, look at the fuselage, and try to get what I hope is I rough it out. Now it's kind of flat around the top and has a pretty good taper going back. This end is coming down on about that angle. It has the flat spot. And of course there's going to be a lot of mind's eye going back and forth here. And I always feel like, see, we're not doing a scale model, but even if you're wrong, it's better to have the canopy a little bit too big than a little bit too small. Always better to be a little bigger than smaller. It makes like a caricature. Now just some of the things as I'm trying to get, that I have the angle of the bars, I have that pretty close. The front angle, pretty close. A little bit of this bar is going to show in terms of a side rib. The front piece is going to be dead flat. Again, I won't really know until I start carving away here and whacking and hacking. Okay, this piece is going to have a bar across here, up the back. This is just the roughest of rough. But I just don't know any other way you really could do this other than I could put this in a photo enlarger, but no. I really probably wouldn't come out any better because I wouldn't get the scale right. This way I'm getting that overall impression of a scale the way I want it. If anything, this has to have a little more. I'll put an arrow to a little more of a curvature in the top. I think that's going to be close. I just tape that in position even though I don't have the top block, just to get a rough idea of if I'm close. I'm a little on the big side. I know I need more of a curve up here. But again, I'm just trying to rough this out. I want to get the block roughed out if possible tonight. Got a little bit of time here to spend. If I can get this roughed out, I'll be one step ahead. See, the idea is I want to get this up to Midgley as soon as possible too, so he can actually do the physical molding of the canopies. Now I want to make sure I give part of the credit for what I'm doing here to Keith Trossel. He was pretty inspirational at the last Nats when I saw his Martin Baker with that canopy. Man, that flipped me out. But he gave me some good ideas. I'm going to try to use them. This canopy, much like a Martin Baker canopy, has some flats up in the front. So what I'm really going to do is cut this up from 3 pieces and leave the middle piece to actually use as my center line and put one on each side. And then from this, using this as the center now, I can taper it out. Much like making a laminated prop blade where you can see the laminates in each prop blade. This will be a good way to do it. And we don't care about the joint because we're ultimately going to cover it all with Bondo anyway. So now I'm adding a little bit of material to the top because I want to get that curve in there. And I think what I've done is I've made this piece too short now looking at it. So I want to trim, before I make the next piece, I want to trim some of this off. I think I've made this flat too long. This flat is really about 1/3, maybe a little less. So what I'll do is I'll trim this. Now, as we always do, and I always suggest you do, cut one piece, glue it to the other piece, or in this case we really can only get 2 in the saw, so I'll have to cut them apart. By doing this, you don't wind up with 3 pieces, and then after you sand them all flat, they're smaller than the original piece. Now I will be able to get all 3 of these out of one piece. I was afraid I wouldn't. Now it's kind of a little bit of a different, you just can't buy a SIG canopy here. Even if you weren't going to have a take-apart canopy, you just can't go buy a SIG Spitfire canopy. It's never going to be the right scale or shape, and this is not a compromise model made for expediency. Getting these angles and shapes and everything right is more time consuming, and in this part of it I'm probably going to go back and forth many times. But I think a good place to start is to make the original plug just a little bit oversized in all dimensions so I can finish it up. We'll unwrap the top block tomorrow and then I can do all the final cutting. But right now, just to get this roughed out, and it really will fit out of one piece. Even though I don't like to do it this way, I have no choice. It doesn't fit in my saw when it's all glued together. I would always prefer to glue these together first. I'll true them up on a belt sander so it won't matter. Remember, this block is plenty oversized, especially in width. There's plenty of extra material to get the curves in. It's much bigger than it has to. Probably could even get away with 2 blocks. Now you can see it's a little bit wider in all dimensions, so the first thing I can do is, certainly no part of it is going to go past the end. But I want to keep this the middle piece in here for my own reference, so I can go and just sand some of this off. Really, just get that end. I was thinking about this. What I'm going to do is try to get a top view of this, and I'll trace this out with a pen. Try to get a top view of this, and I can set up my big bandsaw to do most of the cutting. Grinding this away is just going to make a lot of dust. thinking about this a little bit, and again, this is part of the fun, is as you go along, there's always some new invention. I know I can take maybe a 1/4 inch off each side, and I can interpolate what that contour, that top view is going to be. So I think I'll try that with the bandsaw. Now what I try to establish here first is the maximum width. Again, that's about a 1/4 inch off each side. And then by looking down at get some dust. Looking down at how the canopy tapers, it's flat for the first maybe 1/3. So up till about here, I don't want any taper at all, because this is the part of the canopy that's going to move. That's not going to move. I mean, and then I'll try to just interpolate this in. See, now this is where it's handy to have that center block, because I can reference off each side and see if I'm keeping it symmetrical. Having that center block in there is really handy. And if you didn't have a center block, you might want to have some kind of a center line or run some masking tape down there. And that pretty much, well, we have to see when we cut it out. Now after a little test fit here, I realize it's still a little bit too big. I'm going to take another 1/8 inch off with the saw, and then I'll start putting the curve in. I want to have about 1/8 of an inch less on each side when I'm done. See, the problem is you got to take into account the material itself is going to be 40 thousandths or so big. So I don't want to have this too big. I need about this plug to be about 40 thousandths less than the actual part that Midgley's going to mold. That's about the right amount of clearance I want to leave on each side. That'll take into account the material itself. Okay, now I'm trying to interpolate. See how much of a curve is in this bubble? I'm trying to interpolate. This is a bulletproof glass here. So I want to try to interpolate that. Now where the hell did I put the block? I'm just trying to rough this out by hand to get that shape in there. Now I try to look at this from a lot of different angles just to get an idea of how I'm going to like this. I flattened this front out a little more. I'm going to redraw that line in there. Just looking at it before I start the carving, because once I start carving, this goes in a hurry. Now this is where having that center block is a real handy thing. I'm just looking at that and trying to get this in proportion. Again, this is just a back and forth thing here. This is just back and forth until it looks in proportion right. I tried to interpolate here just a little bit the top view. And now I'm going to get a brand new number 26 blade and start roughing this out little by little. Now just roughing this out is one of the easy parts. It's getting all the little details on it's going to take time, so I don't know how much time I'm going to have left tonight. I'm just going to do as much of the roughing out as I can. It'll be getting the ribs in and making the mating parts that'll take time, but just an idea, just getting it roughed out. Yeah, it's starting to shape up. Just takes a little time. And again, this is one of those things, as I start to see the shape I'm looking for, I'm trying to refer back to that Seafire book. Now as I'm going along, I'm just going to try to dress this off and just keep looking at that manual. This part of it I think is the easy part. It's that front part where the ribs are, and I'm going to try to make them out of plywood if I can. trying to put a nice final sanding on this back piece before I will lay out the ribs. Again, I'm trying to improvise a little bit as I go along here. Since this is the first one of these we've done, there may be some re-engineering along the way, but we'll definitely give it our best try. It's starting to look like a canopy anyway. Now this is what's handy. This is what's handy about having this centerpiece, is by looking even at the bottom, I can see which side I'm favoring, and then I can just dress off the side that has too much material on it. Without that center, I'd be just throwing darts in the dark here. I notice one side is a lot rounder than the other, and a couple of shots of the sandpaper, I can bring it right into alignment. But having that center block there is really a big help. Okay, the first piece I want to make up is this bulletproof. By the way, this, for anybody that doesn't know, this is bulletproof glass here. So we're going to make up this front piece probably out of a piece of plywood, and just glue it right on until we can get this flat look. These three pieces are relatively flat. Now to start off with, I made up just a template out of 16th plywood. That'll be my flat piece of bulletproof glass, and now I'll trace this out on 1/8 inch plywood so I can have that rib cage that goes around it. Again, you got to do a little figuring and interpolating here. You don't know what this is going to look like until you lay it all out. Maybe it'll be a little too big, a little too small, but you won't know until you finish it. Now again, you just have to do a lot of this by eye, but I'm trying to just get a rough idea of what that would look like in this dimension. Remember that old thing I always say, the devil is in the details. This is one of those details that's probably going to be very time consuming to get right. I want to get this bulletproof glass to be about as realistic as I can possibly get. And it's going to take some time making up some of these little parts for the mold. So I cut this out of 1/8 inch plywood. And this is going to go in front of this. And this will be for my bulletproof glass for that front piece. Now with this little piece made up, I want to seal all the edges again. This will help when it comes time to put the final finish on this. All the edges get sealed. This is a relatively complex canopy, by the way. This is, and don't forget, that Stuka canopy is probably the only one that's worse, but Midgley's already got those, and we have them in stock if you're building a Stuka. Now the next thing I want to lay out is the bars that go across here. Now this is kind of tricky because the bars actually sweep forward. They actually sweep back. I'm looking at it ass backwards. So I want to lay these around, and I want to make them up out of layers of 64th plywood. I'm just going to strip off. I just did this to get an idea. With the grain going lengthwise, I want to strip off some 64th plywood and just build it up in layers until it's as high as I want it to be. Now what I did, I changed the position. You can see where I ripped this up because I didn't have the angle back at exactly the right height, or a height that I was happy with. So now I've just got this tacked on at the edges. Now I can look right from the top and get it perfectly even and glue it on, and then put 3 or 4 more laminates of 64th ply there for that band. So now I'm just guessing that 2 layers of 64th is going to look about right when I get done sanding and bondoing this thing. But again, it's a lot of back and forth. I didn't know how many layers I'd need here. 2 felt about right. Looks about right anyway. Anyway, even if I just get this rough stuff done tonight, I'll be way ahead of the game tomorrow. Because obviously one of the things I have to do is get this mold up to Midgley, have them mold up some canopies before I can go on to detailing. And I'd like to have details inside the canopy, rivet heads and whatever. So this is kind of a critical thing. Now what I'm doing is sealing the edges with some thin CA and then just wiping it with a Q-tips to try to seal up that edge. It'll make the sand out a lot easier. See, I'm trying to get, it's this angle, I'm referencing off the photo, this angle and the nose piece. Okay, here we are, and we got up to this point here tonight. I want to fill this with Bondo. I just put some Bondo in here to get this ridge cleaned up. And then I'll have this will be the bulletproof glass part of the canopy will be finished. And then I can go back over it and put the ridge up. Now this is 2 layers of 64th and everything else is 1. So this ridge should stick up just a little higher to make that joint, that the tongue and groove joint that I want. And I tried to see the angle of the ridge and the angle of the front, try to get that real close. And it took a little more time than I thought it would. Right, I just got the first level of Bondo on here just to make this, that I have Bondo over the raw wood. I don't want any raw wood showing. And so what I'll do is I'll sand this out and then I'll build 1 more layer of 64th plywood up over the ribs. And then this will hopefully sink down in a little bit and you know, give me the detail, and I'll be able to detail and scribe that out. I know you'll get a kick out of this. I spent the whole night tonight making chips and plywood and all this little junk, really, to just arrive at this, the amount of stuff I have on the canopy. But again, it's just glued 64th strips. Now what I'm going to do is, this is just wood. I'm going to soak that with CA to harden it up, and then start to get a couple coats of auto primer on this, that spray Krylon primer, and maybe by a day or 2 get it up to Midgley. And again, I'm just working off of that drawing, the corners, the angles. Now I really don't know how accurate this is relative to the scale modeling, but I do have the recess for the bulletproof glass, the double supports up here, and pretty much, well, hope I've captured that overall look. But again, still needs to be final sanded, the wood hardened. Couple more steps, maybe I'll get some of this done later, but this has been a lot of little detail work, just one of those little devil in a detail specials. Now this is the part where it really gets to be fun, trying to build up some coats of thick CA on here and trying to wipe them fast enough that they don't glue the paper towel to the part. You really need to make this rock hard, and I think this will do it before I start with the primer. This wants to be all hard. You don't want any soft balsa. Now I got about 4 coats of thick CA on here, sanding each one out, and basically the hardest part to get is the corner. Remember that tool we made up with the angle? Well, I've got some fine sandpaper on that, and I'm trying to get all the little details relieved, get in all the corners and edges here. It's kind of time consuming and boring, but hey, I want this plug. I want to get a coat of primer on this tonight if I can. I really have put a lot of time. It doesn't show up on the video, but this was very time consuming. But I'm hoping we'll have a lifetime supply, even for you, of Seafire canopies. And it does look pretty realistic anyway. Okay, the next step here, and we're really running out of time now. It's on, okay. I got a little handle so I can hold this while I'm auto primered. I got this all sanded down with 400 nice, about 5 coats of thick CA wiped on with a paper towel. I think that's ready for a coat of primer. I don't know if I've got the look, but it's as good as it's going to be tonight. This has been a long day. I guess 4 or 5 coats would do here. A little bit of sanding between coats. Boy, this is the kind of information I love to get. Everybody that I know that likes Tiger 60s or Tiger 60 type of motors has been looking for rev-up props. Well, Bill found I had 60 or 50 of them here, 30, I don't know, 33 props. So, listen, here's the address. Bill Hummel, Thank you for passing this on. It's in Finley's Hobbies, Wichita, Kansas, 316-683-4221. Bill sent a bunch of props, so it looks like we're back in action here. Anybody need some rev up props, check this out. Now it's amazing how nice this Krylon primer sands. And I guess 4 or 5 coats is all I'm going to need here, but you can just see how quick this sands right down.
I said hello. He says hello, come right over. When I got there, she took one look at my nose and said, "You sure must have hurried. You forgot to hang up the phone." Yes, it's kind of hard to put it in words, but I want to be mysterious.
You just see how quick that comes right off. No, I really did spend a lot of time on this. I can't believe I spent this much time making a mold, and from this point on, it's up to Mr. Dave Midgley to do his magic. And I hope he's going to be able to take some video of maybe making up these canopies, just for the record. See, getting in those ridges is where it really takes a lot of time, just to get the corner of the sandpaper right in the ridge. There you can see how rough that was. You can see by how the primer has sanded off all of the low spots. And it's just a question of putting this on coat after coat and sanding it off till we have a nice smooth shell finish. Actually, this canopy does look a lot like a Seafire canopy. I have to give myself a little credit here. I'm not too putsy tonight. Ah! See, that stuff even happens to me. If you get a little mistake, just put the primer right over it. The hell with it. We're going to sand it out anyway. And see, even if you drop the part, you can have it. That front looks nice. That really does look like the bulletproof glass part of the canopy, too.
When I got there, she took one look at my nose and said,
well, we're at the end of this tape. We're close to the end. We're at the end. I don't even know where we are. It's been such a long day. I'm dropping parts and whatever. But I think we do have the bones of this mold. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll share it with, obviously, with all your other friends. Assuming you have some friends. Share it with everybody. Have a few laughs. The adventure of the Seafire continues, and we will pick it up on the next tape. I'm so glad we got to this point. I really feel like this is starting to shape up to be a, it's a real airplane now. It really is shaping up. And by the next tape, we'll have some top blocks. Be working on all our final fits on a fusee. Maybe see Joe Adamusco. Get together with him and work on the wings. It's coming. Well, I love the smell of this stuff too. So pleasant. Anyway, I hope this gives you some ideas for stuff. Maybe you can be upgrading your model skills, or maybe you just like seeing me bust my ass. Either way, it's okay. And DeJulia, I want pictures of that shop. I know you got a lot of money, DeJulia. Send me some pictures of that shop. Now I'm going to close out the little time that's left here. George brought some pictures over of the steam train trip that we were on. And hey, if you're interested in steam trains, I'll be glad to send you a free copy of the video. It was fun. Got some pictures that George took, and I'm going to close out this tape with those pictures. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you on the next tape.
With you.
The silver, and we sprayed this and redid it. It looks like it's going to need one more coat. A couple little dry spots, but nothing terrible. But I like to check it, and it's always best if this sits by a heating vent overnight. It's always ready the next morning for the next sand out. No point even doing that on camera anymore. By the way, the horn, that little trick with the horn worked out well. Here it is. Let's see. It's well, middle of January, and Bill Hummel sent up what amounts to be a Christmas present, but I get a couple of these or some of these every year from the local pizza place. Now the idea of this is Bill is not a foolish person. He knows when we go up there to do our spray seminar or a Scott's contest or something, he'll hit me up for some pizza, and that's perfectly okay. I do like having the shirts. I got them from all over the country. They are a lot of fun to have. And thanks a lot. But I did get something really, and this is the one I want to really share with you. This is the stuff that just came from Dave Midgley. And I can see we're going to have a busy day today. He did shoot some video of making the canopies. And the reason I wanted him to do that is to share that with you. Making the canopies is always, and I have tried to do this in the oven and tried to do it, you know, in the barbecue and stuff. No good. If you have a vacuum forming machine, it's a whole different ball game. Now it looks like I got 4 of them here to start with. I'll focus in on this a lot closer and I'll show the mold. These really look like all the bulletproof glass is intact. This is really a work of art. And this is really what separates, at some point in time, and I've said this before, you got to decide if you just want to build plane after plane after plane and grind them out, or if you really have something special you want to do. And it's a personal challenge. It's not a challenge like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to beat Joe Smith or Ed Belcrank or something. The challenge is, can you do it yourself? Just to not to impress anybody but yourself. Anyway, he had told me about this, and this is the catalog work. It looks like we're going to be able to get some. Maybe there's even a sample, and yes, there is. Now, I've already talked to Dave about this. This is the real light. It's let's see if it is. It's 3-ounce carbon fiber that's tightly wound. This is usually not commercially available. It's very difficult to get this. And this is one of the things we want to look at when we actually get a chance. Now this is, let's see. This is even lighter stuff. Wow. So these will be the things when we actually, assuming we do have the time to make that carbon fiber body, we'll be working with that. But the big thing is, I want to get this if I can, even on the end of this tape. This is the footage from Dave. These are the canopies, and we've already had on the tape set how the mold was made. But this, if you're going to make a special plane, and there are hopefully going to be other special planes in my life, P-40s, whatever, and you need a special canopy, well, this canopy obviously will fit even straight line stunners, and I'll have these in stock, of course. But what it is if you're making a Seafire, you really can't use a chipmunk canopy. You really have to have something special with all the armor plating and the detailing. And I'm amazed to see how well this came out. The other thing is I want to get this that it's a sliding canopy, and I have to invent and come up with ideas for that mechanism still. So this will give me a lot of thoughts while we lay out the day's work here. This will be a lot to think about. If you might remember all the work we did, we made this mold actually twice, and this is not the one he drew the canopies from. This is the plug we used to make a rubber mold that he used to make a solid resin casting, or from a resin-like material. But anyway, I'm going to mail one of these off to Joe today. These really look incredible. These really look super. And what I want to do, I guess he's got about 10 or 15 minutes of video on that. It's always interesting to people that buy Sig Chipmunk canopies or whatever, when they see how a canopy is made. It really is interesting, and so I'm going to let Dave take over this. 5 minutes, 6 minutes. It's still moving around a little bit, but it's getting there. I mean, this stuff moves pretty quick. If you take a look. Now, one of the things I thought I might do is if I can find something
like a piece of wood or something to stick in that mold to allow me to yank it out. It might be advantageous.
We're gonna push this to 3 or something?
This should be on 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's on 3. And that's on... Oh, the tracking.
I think I put it on real slow, I'm not sure.
We'll figure it out in a second. We'll try to find something to shove in here. May not need it.
Wow.
Now it's getting warm. It's in the beginning it wasn't very exothermic. Now it's getting hot. Yeah, it's too late to stick anything in there. But that's not a big deal. I'd rather not have to put anything in there, because in a vacuum forming mold I just have to cut it out later because I want the thing to sit flat. That's set up pretty good. And if we have to take this tub apart and actually just get in there and release this thing from the sides tomorrow when we go to do it, so be it. I mean, this thing it's built to be expendable. Hopefully we got a good one. But if not, if we're very careful about taking this apart, if we have to, if we're real careful about doing that, then we can assemble it back together, hold it, and just make another one. We can probably make as many of these as we want. What I'll probably want to do is actually make one where I have a parting line. Take a thin piece of Teflon film and put a parting line in here, so that if a guy wants a 2-piece canopy, I can actually make a 2-piece mold. Stick them together or pull them apart, whatever I want. And that'll probably be the next thing we try, is to make this in 2 parts. Take a real thin piece of Teflon film, probably 20 thousandths. Slide it on the parting line, cut it to fit, and try it. We'll just see what happens. But this is hard. Tomorrow morning, this will be hard as a rock. We'll take a look at this and see what we've got. Now we're going to try to get the Jeff Gordon video to work. Well, it's about 5 after 8. The stuff dried up beautifully, and what I did to take this apart was I just pulled the wall off, which allowed me to wiggle the sidewall a little bit on this mold. Separated this one. I just got down in there, squeezed it, and I was literally able to just pick it out in my hands. I would say this is probably about as best as you can get. I mean, this is absolutely gorgeous. The surface of this stuff is pretty good. The detail's beautiful. There's a couple of little teeny bubble pinholes in it, but I mean they are very small. And now what I've got to do is, in order to get this window to form, it's actually a female cavity. This whole mold is a male, but this window is a female. The film has to bridge across this shape and then pull in. So what I've got to do is I've got to take this mold, and I've actually got to remove all the material in this section up in here, in back of the surface, so that I can drill some little vent holes, typically in each corner. If you're ever doing any mold work, one of the things you always want to remember is the inside of every female corner has to be vented. Every female cavity has to be vented, and typically it's right in the corner. In this case, what I'm inclined to do is I'm going to put a vent hole right here, a vent hole here, maybe one here and one here. I may even put one right at the top. And what that will do is that will pull the film in and give me this 3-dimensional effect. Now you say these are female cavities as well. These will probably tend to vent. As the film pulls down this way, these will probably tend to vent, and you'll get fairly good definition. Now, one of the bad things about making a mold with very thick material, Wendy wants to make this mold out of maybe 40 or 60 mil material. Once you get thinner, the ability for the film to show detail gets less. So what we've got to do is we've got to find a combination between the right film thickness and the amount of detail that he wants to show in this thing. I think 40 mil, maybe 60 mil will be the max. I don't think we'll want to go any more than that. And you'll be able to follow what we do with this next. You'll be able to follow the parts coming off. But if you want to make a perfect, if you want to make a canopy mold, you can take your chances with a block of wood, or you can take this approach. I mean, the technology of this is explained in some of the earlier videos. This is real. This works real well. This mold is literally now capable of making thousands and thousands of parts. Whereas a wood mold, if you're lucky, you may get a dozen before you have to refinish it. In some cases, I've made 100, 150, but the stuff does start to break down. This will last forever, absolutely. I'm real happy with this. This is worth the extra effort. I know Wendy put a lot of time into this mold, and based on what I'm seeing here this morning, I wish he was here to see this come out, but based on what I'm seeing, he's going to be real happy with this. This is real nice. We'll probably take this to work today and just try forming a few pieces over it to see what the surface quality looks like. I may want to sand it just a little bit with 1000 or 600 paper, just to take off some of the little, just the little surface imperfections that I can feel. And they're minor, and in any other case it would be acceptable, but I want this thing to be perfect. So we're going to do that, and we'll pick it up.
No, I just thought you'd enjoy sharing that. That was from Dave, and he's going to be sending us more video. But really, I've really taken a good look at these. These are, and you can usually tell by the clarity of the plastic and just how really nice it is. It's really a professional job. Again, Dave, thanks, and thanks for sharing that with us. I really have, you know, anybody that doesn't know, Dave is going to be taking over my business when I pass on to Stun Heaven. It's already an official thing. And it's good that he's getting a little practice in how to shoot video and how to make them fun to be around and fun to watch. Hey, we found out that Lou Walgast's good friend of mine, his father had passed away, and the wake is tonight, so I don't want to get involved in anything too heavy. But what I can do, I just kept fooling around laying this canopy out in several different ways. And what I want to do, I want to lay out the, at least roughly where the hole is going to be for the pilot, and I think I can get that accomplished without a whole lot of problem. I want to be, again, that whole thing of it, he really in a scale thing would be right over the trailing edge of the wing, but I think with all the compromises I have to make, I think that's going to be the closest one. Step one is I'm just going to trace this out with a little pen and just roughly cut out the little spot that I hope will be ultimately be the pilot opening. Now I always like to lay things out with tape first. The tape, what it actually does, I can move it, I can adjust it, I can get it centered, I can move it back and forth, do whatever I want to do. Then when I'm kind of happy with that being exactly what I want, I can lay in a pen line, I can pull up the tape, get a brand new blade, and then cut that piece out. But if I just cut it without having a tape or a pen line, I don't know, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. This seems like a little safety factor. Number one, we're right in the way of the cross bracing that we put in front of this. So the first thing is I'm going to have to get that cross bracing out of there. And get all this out of there. See, I didn't know where the pilot was ultimately going to wind up sitting. But this has to come out. Problem is, from this point on, this top block is getting increasingly delicate and vulnerable as we make it more and more susceptible to taking a whack. Now it looks like I'll have a good amount of room here, actually more than I thought I would. To get the pilot, I'll only have to gouge out the back of his side to get the pilot in there.
Hey, not too bad, Artnowski. Fits pretty good. Georgina knows what the hell he's doing, huh?
Anyway, that's only the first part. And see, a lot of this that's gonna happen now is going to be determined by dry fits. For instance, the pilot's head can't hit the cockpit. I can't have my sliding mechanism for the cockpit itself. I can't have that interfere with the pilot in some way. But just to get a rough idea, I mean, right now that looks like that's going to be at least in the doable range anyway. I don't know. I walk all around and I keep looking at what I can do to get all the rough fits before I go any further. Now, from looking at the various books, again, it looks like there's a simple back to the seat, which will be a flat piece of 64th plywood, I guess, and this little piece that comes straight back. Now, simulating that will be kind of easy. It has some holes in it, and it looks like it has some kind of an antenna or something there. I don't know what that is. I need to get a picture that shows that closer. But I can make the back of the seat as the first thing, and make this. Both of those pieces I can make right now.
That's right. Make me a decent seat.
Okay, step one. Let me take him out. Let me make up a template for the back of this, and I'll make that up with an IBM card first. Make up a little template for the back of this seat. I ought to put some tape on this block to hold it in place. Yeah, I want to make the seat go down far enough. Of course, the push rod is going to be in the way. I'm going to have to put a little channel in the push rod, but then come up here. And the whole idea is, if I can make this out of 64th plywood, it'll actually function as a rib here too, and stiffen up the body to some amount. So it'll not only go along for the ride, it'll serve a little purpose. So if I just roughly measure up how wide I need this, I know I'm going to need a spot about that high. It's going to have a top roughly even to the top block. Now what I need to do is just roughly sketch in, and this is real rough, what I want this to look like, something like that. The trick is to fold it completely in half. Let's see if we can do this accurately. Fold it completely in half and rough cut it out, and I should have a mirror image on the other side. I was reading in a book just today how when they went to the bubble canopy Spitfires, which basically started production in '43, what a tremendous advantage it was that the pilot could look back and see who was attacking him. Now I'm just looking down at where the arrow shaft is. I'm going to have to make an allowance that cut for the arrow shaft. Okay, now from this pattern I can see I have the width right. What I need to do is just extend this down. I want it to actually touch the floor so it acts as a reinforcement when I finally do get to glue this. So I need to just measure this with a machinist ruler, add that amount to it, and then duplicate this part in 64th plywood. Let's see, part of this whole thing, I guess part of any model making, part of anything you're trying to construct, is always to make up a pattern, and you know in which areas it's got to be longer, shorter, wider, thinner. Now I know this has to be considerably wider, so what I can do now, I can trace this out, add in this material, and then when I go up, just trim the final piece. I really should only have to do this once. But this then will act almost like a former. It actually, instead of just going along for the ride, it'll do some work. Now if you go far enough back into modeling or into stunt, you'll remember that there was a time when virtually every plane had a cockpit. And I guess those skills, you know, they're not lost, but certainly a lot of people have taken what amounts to be a lot easier way out. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but we want to go back and recreate those, what I'll call the traditional, yeah. Anyway, and I don't think you're going to see the bottom of this, but this is a good way. Actually, just making up patterns is almost a lost art here. Leave just a little bit extra material around here. Now I can take a Dremel tool, because the Dremel tool with a sanding drum will just get me in there with nice clean edges. Now I need to get as much clearance around that push rod. I don't want to have any interference with that push rod. I want to leave a little extra so I can maneuver these parts around at the last minute when this gets finally installed. Now I'm checking to see I have plenty of clearance around that push rod. I don't want to take any chances, and I'll leave this just a little bit oversized. I want to make this so it actually is the back of... I need some clearance here for my sliding canopy mechanism. This would have a curve from looking at the pictures. One of the things I'm going to do is I got to make an accurate template up for Bob Martens here so that this can be included on the Seafire plans. One of the things you can always do is take the original piece and mirror image it to see that you're not losing it. In other words, if you put it on there one way, since this is made from a 90-degree piece, you can always reverse it to make sure you haven't lost or the amount that you're not happy with there, which this looks okay. And this looks like a final part. Now once it's dressed off, I don't want to glue anything in. I want to make all this up so it's like just pieces ready to assemble. I'd like to paint them ahead of time if I could. Again, I'm kind of improvise as I go along, but each time I make a piece up, I will make a part for Bob so that he can put this and include it in on the plans. I want to radius these edges off so that this becomes like a semi-finished piece anyway. Next piece I want to do, I want to look at the books. Let's get the trash out of here. Simulate this little piece, and it looks like it's almost a straight piece, a triangle, so that should be real easy to simulate. Get the rough edges off this. Again, more 64th plywood. This is the material of choice. This stuff is real light and it's real strong. When this is glued into position in a rigid way, it's very strong. I just want to mark which is the back here. The reason for that is I'm only going to paint the side that you can actually see. And I believe, I can't really tell from the pictures, I'm going to have to look at some more pictures, that there is a little bit of a headrest up here for the pilot, but I want to make that little triangulated piece next. That's the piece that goes from the seat back into the fuselage. Okay, now I just want to take and I'll make me up a little cardboard template for that little piece and get a little trial fit on it. Okay, I can see that's too big. Okay, that looks like about the right size. Rough look. It has 3 holes. And I made a little, I'll give this to Bob, I can actually use this. But to get these holes into the plywood, one of the tricks that's worth using is use a grindstone with a point and burn them through. If you go to drill them, burning them through always makes for a real nice part. The trick that's worth its weight in gold is before you take and cut the part off, drill the holes in first. Otherwise you're holding this little thing in your hand and the grindstone's shaking, and much easier to burn the holes in first before you cut the part out. That's a real good tip. It's kind of a grindstone tip, and this is one that I use for sharpening my chainsaw, but you can see that it's all burned up from burning it through plywood, but it does leave a nice round edge. Look at the spacing on these holes. It's not equal distance, that's for sure. I don't know if that's too big or what. Now I can't really tell if I got the hole spacing exactly scale looking, but it certainly looks close enough. Okay, just a question of cutting it out now. Again, from looking at this, I don't know if I got the holes as scale as I possibly could, but if I'm unhappy with this later, I can always remake it, of course. It only takes a second or two to make it. Okay, again, nothing is glued in yet. It's all dry fits. And it's always good if you can to make as much of it in pieces, paint it and everything ahead of time, and glue it after you're all done. What I want to do, I just want to make up a little balsa wood pad like a headrest. Some of these World War II fighters I've looked through all the books and I can't really see an accurate depiction, but I know they all had some kind of a little pad for the pilot's head. Rough this out and then radius everything in till I have, this is the outline of the seat back, and get an idea of that's pretty much what I want. Now this photo here shows the best depiction of that headrest that I can find. 3 holes in the triangulated piece and a headrest. Now, by the way, this has the modern gun sight, and that was one of the big improvements in the Spitfire Seafire series. Toward the end of World War II they had, and I just read about this the other day too, doing all this reading, about how accurate this gun sight mechanism was on the planes. They actually dialed in the wingspan of the plane into the gun sight to get it to sight better. Interesting, as all things are, very interesting. Okay, got that piece out of the way. To do is accumulate all my loose parts in an area. I want to save that piece that I cut out. I don't know if I can make something, seat, dashboard, back of the seat. It's a nice piece of wood, and we know, actually it's one of the things I'm hoping I can use it for something, but I haven't figured out what though. Have the back of the seat, have the little triangulation done. So what I want to do, I want to lay out the plywood here that's going to be actually become the mechanism that slides the canopy. Now I'm really almost out of time, but I can take the tape off, take the block off, and I want to measure. The cockpit is going to have to slide from here, and how many inches it's going to slide back, and I want to line the inside of the block with the shell with 64th plywood. You can see I'm going to have to cut a little bit of a notch in the pilot's back here eventually when I eventually glue him in. But his hand conveniently clears the push rod. Boy, that's just perfect. It's almost like I planned it that way. These are the kind of things. Hey, don't cut my back out. Hey, my back doesn't itch. Anyway, I've got it marked now exactly where he goes. And boy, that is, I'll tell you, I never stop admiring George. That is some pilot, baby. He is really somebody special. Look at even the shine on the glasses, like he's got the shine from the glass there. Pro stunt. That is professional. You bet it's professional, you Pollock. Now there's a time, every time I build one of these, I get to a point where I'm going to glue the top block on. I look around, I make sure most of my work is done inside, and I always think to myself, I want to dedicate each plane to somebody who has played a very special part in my life. Now last year, John Pothier, I can't imagine anybody that's done more for me than him. Very, very few people have put more time and energy into upgrading my life. Anyway, and John, basically, again, thanks a lot. So many other people. Dave Midgley is one, who eventually will get a plane dedicated to him. Big Jim, of course. John DeTavio's already had one. George Venturini's already had one. But so many people have contributed, I guess, bits and pieces into my life. But the person I'm going to dedicate this project to is Harold Price. Now, Harold Price, for anybody who doesn't know, really, when I was a young kid, had no father, and basically was out stealing hubcaps and robbing cars and who knows what. Whatever was cool that day. He took me and another guy named Carl Wahlberg under his wing, and he gave us a real good lesson in how to build and fly and finish and wet sand, and took us to contests, let us drive his car when we didn't have a license and whatever. And I think it's appropriate that this plane, because of its intricate canopy detailing, I think he would have really been proud of that. I think he would have been proud of the Spitfire or any of these planes. He had a true love of modeling. I'm going to nominate him for the Hall of Fame this year, and hope that Win Paul doesn't make an ass out of himself again trying to write love letters to everybody. But I think he's really a deserving person, at least he is in my book. And if you've benefited from the finishing technology that I've passed along, it's probably because you've gotten it through me from Harold Price. So maybe you in turn would think about saying a little prayer for Harold or whatever is appropriate. I don't know. What I do know is this will be a fitting tribute to Harold. And I will, for sure, right now, put the inscription in by the bell crank mount where I normally do it. The idea being that nobody will ever see that. That's kind of a private thing between the people that share my life with me, kind of an intimate thing. And I really think it's a very special thing. Now, there's certainly a whole lot of other well-deserving people. Tom Morris comes to mind as just one of the person that have had a real positive influence on my life of helping me build the models that I've always had in my mind's eye, and supported me through good times and bad, really, when you come down to it. But for this one, this is going to be a Harold Price plane, and we'll get out the ink marker. And Harold, if you were alive right now, I think you'd be down the cellar here, and you'd probably be saying something like, sand it some more, it's too heavy or something. But boy, we miss you, Harold. Believe me, you are missed. Now, this may seem like a pointless emotional thing to a lot of people, but believe me, it isn't to me. I remember a lot of things that Harold did that inspired me, especially being a young kid from the ghetto, you know, being exposed to somebody that was a genuine human being and a genuine good modeler, an excellent modeler. Harold, we miss you, baby. To tell you, Harold Price was one very special person, and the things I remember about him, they lasted a lifetime. It didn't die when he died, that's for sure. He was one special person to me. Anyway, Harold, the Seafire is now your possession, and you better make it a good flying plane, or I'll go down to your grave and... Okay. It looks like I had a lucky guess when I put the formers in. I have them right about where I really should have them on this piece. But I want to lay out a piece of 64th plywood. I guess I'll lay it out right up to the former. I need to be able to slide this an amount. And I need to have it go from one end to here to the other. So maybe I'll take this former and move it back so I can have a little bit extra plywood there. Let me see. Now I want to get this, in fact I broke the biggest part out. Again, one of the things you can see on a video is when you're doing a prototype plane, there's a lot of back and forth. Actually, you waste a lot of time just going back and forth doing this. But once the plans are there, and you know the plane flies good, and you know what the given weights are and everything else, boy, building the next one is a piece of cake. And that's why we spend so much time with Bob Martens especially, to make sure the plans are accurate, to make sure they're right. Anyway, I'm going to lay out that piece of 64th plywood. I'm hoping 64th plywood is going to be enough of a support that I can slide that back and forth. But you can see this block gets pretty vulnerable and pretty complicated in a hurry here. Not even sure up to this point if this is going to work at all. But if it doesn't, you can bet we're certainly not going to go and erase the video. What we're going to do is learn something from it that we can hopefully pass on to other people. Anyway, I can just lay this out. From looking at this, again, I'm trying to estimate how long this piece should be. Really, we got it way to hell too long. See, this is why I have to check it every step of the way. Really, right about there, I'll be fine. Something I didn't analyze this right. This is going to start here. Roughly here is where this part is going to wind up being. That's the front of the part that's going to move. The support is probably going to end about here. That's going to give me that much support. So what I need to do is get it to come back all the way back, because that's where, you see how much I was off by? So what I'll do is extend this back. It's a good thing I checked it. Luck. It just didn't look right. That support needs to go back a lot further than I thought it did. So in fact, I'm going to make it just a little bit extra, because what I noticed on the plans is, the plans at a real spit, but a real Seafire, what I what I noticed, and it's funny, is you can see that slot sticking out under the canopy in almost all the photos. So I want to simulate that slot even. I'd really like to even have that slot be prototypical. And by doing it now, I have brass and I have aluminum pieces of this, but I really would like to do as much of it with plywood. This canopy will add an extra ounce, ounce and a half to the plane, and that's why we're trying to keep it light. But I would like to add as many details as possible, and if I can keep even the weight of the details down, even better. Again, I want to leave this sawdust on here so that I get a good bond with the soft balsa. You see, who owes Windy money? Send them hate mail. Don't sign it, just send them hate mail. That pamper list is handy, isn't it? Yeah, all these people send me bad bouncing checks. You have to deal with this woman eventually.
Elsie Avenue.
Elsie Avenue, yeah. Lay this out. These are going to be the internal supports. Of course, the grain's going front to back. It'll add a lot of strength, I'm sure, too. I want to lay it out in such a way that it's going to go to the front. I want to get it far enough forward. I can get it up just a little bit. But what I want to do is mark this so I can lay this out with thick CA roughly. You need to mark one side. Now I can glue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue in here. This is slow drying thick CA. At the same time, I'm going to put a little bit of dust on here. Just sand this lightly so I get some dust, and let the dust kick off the slow CA so I can get a good grip on it. Okay, now obviously I'll just make sure this is dry. This stiffens it up quite a bit too. See, this block is really getting flimsy at some point in time. I'll do the same thing on the other side, lay it out and glue it in. I'm going to make sure this is all kicked off. This is probably all I'm going to get to do tonight. It's time to go to the wake. Jimmy's due here momentarily, so let me just clean up the shop and we'll pick this up tomorrow. See, there's even a little spot up here, a little ridge, like where the pilot would go, and I can of course cut that around as I need to. But what it'll be is the pilot will actually be touching plywood, so I can get a good grip there rather than just. Okay, I guess that's a good start, but that's all we're going to get done tonight. So see you in the morning. Now, one of my friends from Spain, I hope I'm saying this name right, Jose. I've fooled around, and if you get one little drop of CA on that sandpaper surface, it looks terrible. So, another thing too, mixing up small amounts of epoxy like this is 5 minutes. Never mix up, you know, like one drop of it, because you can't get the ratio really accurate that way either. Now what I'm going to do is let this sit for a few minutes and go into its what I'll call a cheese state, so it's a little thicker than normal. Probably 2 to 3 minutes is what that needs to do. Then I can start just by taking the least little bit. Boy, you only need a millionth of a drop here. Now what I did, I did all the epoxy in through the back, just dropped it in. I don't want any dripping out on the front. Now what I'm going to do is put a little piece of Scotch tape over this, or masking tape even, just to hold that from coming out. Now luckily nothing dropped out on the front here. Now I need to, using my ambidextrous ways, before that epoxy kicks off, see if I can drop these in. And as long as they're just touching 1/1,000,000th of a drop of epoxy, we have it made. It'll stay in there. Now that one went too far in. It looks like I'm going to have to put one right on top of it maybe. Ah! Son of a gun, went in backwards. Luckily I have a lot of these. You gotta dump some more out of the pack. Again, this is just one of those little details. Boy, talk about details. Now I'll put one on top of the other and hope that I get enough epoxy sitting through there. Now again, the nice part about this, even if these were not perfect, because I can slide the canopy back and work on them, hey, it's not the end of the world. I'm trying to, I can see the epoxy oozing out of there. I'm really trying to do this delicately. I added 2 more. And what I found I was having better luck doing without the Scotch tape was just poking them in this way. Famous last words. Now what I'm going to do is when I get these in place, then I'll add some epoxy from the back. In fact, I can add some over these. Just make sure these are nice and solid. See, even though I can get in here and get at these, I'd rather not get in and get at them. I'd rather have them nice and solid. The easiest way I found, and again I'm in a learning curve here, is to babysit them. You can just kind of, as soon as that epoxy starts to kick off, a couple minutes into it, you can feel it start to get a little skin to it, cheese, whatever you want to call it. Then I can just probe these down. When I was at the Nets, I was looking at some of the, I think it's on the video too, I was looking at some of the giant scale, especially the jets, and it was a Sea Fury. And I was looking at the cockpit detail, and the thing I said was, how the hell do they do that? It was amazing. So I'm wondering, maybe somebody will look at this and go, how the hell did he do that? I don't think so. Anyway, this will be an above average cockpit, that's for sure. I want to start thinking about, when I get done with this, babysitting this, I want to think about making up a throttle quadrant. A throttle quadrant. Say that quick 10 times. Throttle quadrant. Okay, you really have to babysit these jewels, but hard to believe we're doing this, but anyway, it will get to the point where the CA starts to kick, or the epoxy kicks up, and it'll just kind of hang there for about 2 minutes, and you can set it right into the final position. When this epoxy, see, starts to turn to this, now you know. It hardens quicker in big masses, so in a small amount, now I can get a brand new toothpick that isn't all glocked up. Now I know I can get the final set. This will still be a little flexible, a little rubbery. Oh yes. And if I'm real lucky, I won't push it right out onto the floor. Anyway, this is a nice detail, whether you're even doing a Magnum, a Nobler, or whatever. Those little jewels really add like the little lights that are on a dashboard of a real plane. Mixing up a fresh batch because I want to get another coating of epoxy so that these things are contained from the back. Might sound like overkill, but then, hey, a lot easier to do this now than after the plane has 200 flights on it. Yeah, you really love that. I have to tell you, that's one of the things I really, when I was over by Giant Scale RC, they really do cockpit details. Keith Trossel, by the way, had cockpit details. Unbelievable. It really is inspiring to see somebody that's a real modeler do their thing. Now I can see this from this side. This may sound like a lot of work, but you know what? When you're out at the flying field and you got all these white airplanes with red stripes on them and stars and stuff, and all of a sudden there's something that's just a little bit different. And I guess you need that inspiration or you're really wasting your time. If you're just doing it like it's, you know, like it's working in McDonald's, it isn't worth it. It's got to be that you feel like you're doing something special. Oh man, I like that. Really helps too is this little, I call it a, for lack of a better word, the George eyeglasses here. This really, and now I know George uses this when he does this little tiny lettering on his fire engines where that they have one hair on the brush and it works well. Now even as blind as I am, this really makes a difference. This is another one of those tools, if you don't have one, once you have it, you're going to wonder, I got to get a new toothpick. Once you have it, you wonder how the hell did I do this stuff without it? Again, I'm looking from every angle here. I want to lay out the throttle quadrant next. I always start with a pin when I make up a throttle quadrant. I'm going to clip off one end of this to start with. I need to slice off a little piece of tubing and put a little bit of a notch in it. Always easiest to put the notch in first, slide this onto the wire, and then trim it off. Now, of course, all I got to do is just trim this off and fill the tube with thick CA. Now, I always like to just put some thick CA in each end, and then I can clean this all up. I just ran over and ran that on a buffing wheel, on a polishing wheel. And now I want to make up the semicircle quadrant that goes in. Just find a piece of scrap 1/4 inch, I guess, would be a good place to start. Now what I need to do is go over to the parting wheel and put a slot in there so it simulates a slot. Okay, now I want to put thin CA over the whole surface of everything and sand it down just to harden up the wood. This is a good way to hold it when you want to put on the thin CA. Put it on real quick with a Q-tip and wipe it right off. This ensures that you'll only need 1 or 2 coats of paint when you go to paint this. And let it kick off normally. See what this does? Now I only need 1 coat of paint to get this to cover. Now there's only one thing that I would suggest if you're going to make a little quadrant like this up. And that is to pin, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Where's that piece? What I need to do, once I get this painted, I need to bring this through and then put an L-bend on the bottom. If you just stick this in, what happens in time, it'll loosen up and rotate and everything. So I want to paint it first, but I don't want to forget to put that L-bend in there. Now in today's mail, I got a great letter from Steve DeGiulio. Of course, Steve his claim to fame is having the world's biggest and most luxurious workshop and the most understanding wife who comes out and sweeps up his shop at the end of every session. Yeah, I know. Okay, on to business. This is Mike Palco, and notice real quick, it's an electric motor, an electric powered twister. Now, I'm just reading from his note. To prove an electric and stun, he can fly loops, inverted wingovers, not enough power for overhead 8s. Well, Mike, now listen, Mike, I'm really getting excited about this. I don't want to have to tell you again, if you don't have enough power, get a tune pipe. DeGiulio, give him a tune pipe. No problem. Tune pipe electric is the way to go. Now, speaking of tune pipe electric, now this is the best photo I've gotten in a long time. Long time. We all have seen this at the stunt forum. Needless to say, they're using a tune pipe from a motorcycle or a dump truck or something on this. I don't even know what the specs are. I don't even care about the specs because Banjock, you're always trying to outdo me. You're always on the trailing edge of technology. Look, this is not big, Banjock. Small and puny, another small and puny. Look at the wingspan, it's not even as big as they are. Get real. World's biggest flight streak. They crashed it too. I don't even want to tell you. I'm not going to read the letter till I get some pictures of these guys repairing us. Anyway, the body's made out of solid sheetrock or a bumper from a Kenworth truck or something. Banjock, you'll do anything to outdo Ertnowski. I can hear him now. Let's make a triple-size flight streak.
But you never will. Forget it.
Did Julia put the hex on you? I'll show you what big and tough is. Now look, Banjock, this is big. This is heavy. Notice the plane, bigger than the man. Look at those muscles. Ooh, nice muscles. Anyway, thanks. Steve, thanks for the pictures. I got to get back to doing this cockpit. I'm making me crazy. I got to make up some little throttles and doodads and who knows what else. Now here's another unique little product I can't wait to try. It's some of these little parting wheels. It's really made for a 1/4-inch shaft, but this has been turned down to fit in a Dremel. In fact, I can't wait to try it. Maybe in the course of doing this cockpit, I'll find something to try this on. Anyway, I know the wheels that come with the Dremel, they tend to explode in your face half of the time. Nice button screw here too. But the problem is, I don't know how big of a wheel I'll be able to use here, but I will give them all a try. Anyway, let's get back to doing some detailing here. Enough mail for one day. Maybe years ago, maybe not years ago, maybe right now. Everybody used to take these crazy push pins, take the dashboard, and just keep sticking them in until it looked like a pin cushion. And then about halfway through the year, some of the heads would fall off. Some of the other things, these would fall off. They'd be all inside the cockpit like SpaghettiOs by the end of the year. Anyway, we're going to go up to the next level. Banjock, pay attention. Now, if you want to make it even just a little bit more realistic, I don't know if you're going to see this on the macro lens, a pin really doesn't make it. If this was a real throttle, oh, I love that word, throttle quadrant, and you were flying any kind of a plane, this throttle would have a sliding sleeve and a locking nut so you could lock the throttle in position, at least most of the ones that I've had the joy of flying, like the Air Coupe anyway. So what I do, I take a little piece of aluminum tubing, slide it over the pin, and just put a drop of CA at each edge so it kind of locks it in position. So now I can make up as many of these as I think I need. Now what I did, I put another little piece of copper tubing, telescoping tubing, just to simulate, make it a little more realistic than a pinhead. A little idea here, which looks the more realistic. Anyway, in a real Spitfire or in a real Seafire or in a real Air Coupe, there's a lot of knobs and switches, and they're purposefully always a little bit different, so that even by feel they're different. If you look at the throttle quadrant on a Piper Cherokee even, all of the knobs and switches and everything have a little bit different feel. The whole idea is that even in the dark or at night or whatever, you'd know by feel as well as by view what they look like. Okay, I like that little throttle. That looks good. Now what I want to do, I want to make up some switches for the dashboard. And I'm going to start with these are just heavy duty pins, thick pins. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to the grindstone, grind this end off, and smash this end in a hammer. With a hammer, just beat it to death. Remember watching Annette's video, being over by the RC scale and saying, next year I'll have switches. Go back and look at that video and see if I didn't say that. You know what, we're going to have switches. Anyway, you got to beat this a lot flatter than you really expect it to be. The reason being, now you can grind this like a toggle switch, and it really isn't that difficult to do, but it's really a nice scale touch. Now what I need to do is go over by the Dremel tool and radius this off and file it all down nice and smooth. Now what I did, I just put these in on an angle with a little baby washer underneath it, and I'll put a drop of CA on it. No, I just hit these with a couple of drops of CA. I'm letting it kick off. What I did, I tried to line them up so they're all roughly at the same angle. In case I want to put them in pairs or in sets, they'll all look similar. By the way, anybody ever had an old Triumph motorcycle, you know about those old Lucas switches, and probably that's what they had on a Spitfire too. Actually, these look exactly scale. Okay, now obviously when you pull these out, a chunk of wood comes with it. And I have to take these over and clean them up with a razor. But these really did not come out too bad. And now I have a little way, and boy, love that. That is on the video, by the way. Okay, now the only trick is figuring out how we want to mount them. Now, of course, this is plywood. You really have to put the angle in that you want the switch to set at. If you wanted the switch to be in the up position, put it in on that angle. If it's a neutral switch, this way. Make sure these go all the way through, and then I can just set the switches in. Now what I want to do, I want to get some black dope. And while I have the black dope out, I want to paint the switches. I'll also paint that little guy too, get some paint on this. Maybe we can get this assembled soon. Soon, I keep saying soon. Now see, the idea of getting any of these little detail things is to get a lot of different contrast. Now this will be kind of shiny against the dull background. When this dries, it'll let it stand out a little bit. What you're looking for is a little bit of contrast, a lot of different textures. No, I don't know. I think that looks really cute. Okay, Dollhouse King. It's a lot of work making this, believe me. Now what I'm trying to do is just add a few little rivet heads here or something to dress this up before I get ready to install this. Anyway, I can go right around it. Now most of this you're not even going to see, but you never know ahead of time what part you are going to see, so it pays to do it ahead of time. Because once these parts are glued in, it'll be impossible to get in there and do this kind of detailing. It'll really be a pain in the ass, in fact. What I'm trying to do is see if I can freehand in some rivets or something in here just to busy that area up, and then I'm going to get ready to put the floor in. What I'm doing before I assemble this, taking an ink marker and edging off all the plywood edges. Because I don't know, when I finally get to do the painting, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make a nice joint here. But I know if I have some black ink in there, it'll kind of disguise the joint. It also, the reason I don't want to put paint in there is when I attach the seat back, I want to be gluing onto solid wood. That's going to act as a former in there. And leave the wood back here, and this will give me a nice wood joint. When that seat dries, I'll get the glue in there. That'll give me a good bond. If I paint this edge, I'll never be able to get in there with a brush. There's all kind of little angles and everything. So now all I have to do is paint up to that black edge. Remember that little throttle quadrant? What I need to do now, the paint is dry, set this in there. Now I also want to, let me get the needle noses here. What I want to do is bend a little hook on this. Now if you don't do this, what happens, and this gets loose with vibration, it'll be rotating, so kind of like one of those cheap insurance things. And when she moves Now I can get the handle in exactly the angle I want it in. I can just glue this. Let me recess it, in fact. See, by recessing it, now I can just take a drop of CA. I'll hold that right in position. One of those little cheap insurance things. And the first day you don't do that, I remember, this is funny, Gene Schaefer had a plane one time, and I mean, he was a killer flyer. He might have been the best flyer of all time, I don't know. They always use his name when they talk about it. But halfway through a flying season, the pilot's head came off. And he'd be, you ever have that little game that's like a maze and you try to get all the golf balls or whatever they are in position? Well, he was just before appearance judging trying to get the pilot's head to jump back up on the body. There's no way. In our case, we'll just slide the canopy back and glue his head back on. Anyway, one more little detail here. I want to take some, and again, check with the flashlight just to make sure. No, I just put one drop of 5-minute epoxy behind his head. Remember, I'm using this backdrop as actually a way of holding the pilot in place. And boy, there is nothing, especially if you glue a cockpit on, there's nothing worse than having a pilot come Macarena and right out halfway through the season. The neat little trick is the little epoxy that I have left over to clear, I'm just taking and putting one little tiny drop on the end of each one of the switches. Make it a little more realistic. I think that'll dry with a little shine. Now I still have to make sure once that dries that I can slide these without a problem. Just going to wait for everything to dry up here before I go on to the next step. Colors. But I'm just not in the mood, and especially with a snowstorm on its way here, I'm not in the mood to run down a hobby shop to see if they have any flat. But if you want to make your own flat anti-glare black, the easy way to do it, mix up some black and some thinners till it's kind of on the thin side. This is really kind of easy to do. Don't overdo the talc. And what I'll do is just paint this up in the area. Now it's easier to paint this before I put the little gun sight on, otherwise I'm never going to get the paint around that gun sight. It's going to be very difficult to do that. And anything in front of a pilot would tend to be anti-glare black. You wouldn't find polished, buffed out Imron in front of a pilot, because if you've ever been a pilot of a real plane, you know you look out the front of a plane and all you see is reflections, especially up in the glass area. So this is a good test. If it drips off your brush about like that, that's real good. Still have the faint outline of where I had the canopy on here. What I'm going to do is put the canopy back on and retrace this, trying not to put a dent in the wood so that I don't want to see this in the final product. But I'll bring the paint just a little bit further out than where that is, so that if I decide to move the canopy a little bit further back, I'll have some fine tuning to do. Now I don't know where this parting line for the paint is going to be, so I'll go just a little bit further. That'll be close enough to get me where I want to go. Again, the easiest way is with these, I don't know what you call them, the George goggles. These seem to be the best way. The best tool you have for doing this little close-up work. Of course, it's even better if you happen to have good eyesight, which I don't. Now usually you need at least 3 or 4 coats of this kind of paint, and so I don't try to glob it on. The best thing is to do is get the first coat on thin so you get some decent adhesion. Many times I've tried to thicken up the paint with so much talc that it was like putty. Doesn't work. You need to get a coat on. You can see how thin this is. Let it dry for an hour or so, couple hours, get another coat on. Eventually it's going to have to be sanded a little bit. But you certainly don't have to worry about doing the same finish as we're going to do out here, where you're going to have glass and tissue and everything. This is just a cosmetic, really just like the pilot. A lot easier, again, to do this before that gun sight is installed, too. Now this is going to need probably 2 or 3 more coats, but I get the first coat. The trick is get the coat on wet so you get that good adhesion. Now while that's drying, I wanted to take what I've done in the past on pilots is where their goggles are. I've mixed up some real thin 5-minute epoxy and just taken a toothpick and try to get it on to simulate glass. Now it looks like George might have already done this, but I might have distorted it with my own fingerprints, squeezing it and forcing him in. So I'm going to take and mix up a little batch, try to get the eyeglasses to kind of reflect the same way the red jewels do. Again, the trick here that I know of from the past is just babysit the epoxy for a few minutes, try to keep it from getting a run out onto the part of the pilot that's dull. Again, I hope George isn't mad at me for adding this little detail to his pilot. This is some pilot, believe me. He did a heck of a job. And he is a true modeler, and when I say that, I mean it in, it's not only that his interests are, you know, building a stunt plane, he has modeling skills beyond that. We've seen on the video some of his cars, race cars, RC planes. He is just a multi-talented person, like many people in the world of stunt. You also can get the pupil of the eye with the tip of a Q-tips here. If this doesn't run, it'll really be effective. It always has that. If you go back and look at the Sidewinder pilot, it always looks like he's looking at you. Yeah, my eyes are getting so bad here that I really need these magnifiers. Now you can see the reflection, how that it contrasts from shiny to dull. Okay, while that's drying, what I'm doing, I'm setting up to dye the canopies. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave 2 of them clear, and I'm going to dye 2 of them. The object of this is if I screw one up, I'll have a matched set. Well, hopefully without having to go back and dye it. Grit dye, this is going to be evening blue. I don't know how this is going to look, but even if I make them a little lighter than I expect, again, it looks like in some of the photos, some of the Seaflyers had a blue tint to the canopy. It may be green, blue-green, a reflection of the water, I don't know. If you want to get the water, what I do is put real hot water in here, then it takes less time for it to boil when you put it on a stove. Now what the idea is to get it just to come out just a little below boiling. If it's boiling, the canopy is going to go, it wants to be just, when you see the first bubble coming up in there, cut-off time. You have to do this kind of babysitting it. Now the trick is, this water is really too hot to touch already. Let me see if I can get my hand, ooh. And is to just dunk one of the canopies in, just let it sit for a few minutes. The minute you see a bubble boiling, you know, that's as hot as it has to be. Then I'll take the dye, put it in and stir it up. Keep in mind, this will be, it's dangerous to stick your hand in there once this really gets too hot. One of those jobs, one of many jobs I have to do when Karen's not home, because I use a good pot, see, and she thinks like the dye that's usually left in a pot. I usually try to clean it pretty good, but she catches me once in a while. Anyway, trick number 1, don't use a wooden spoon. The spoon will be blue when you're done, or green. Use a metal ladle, stir the dye. Number 2, don't get, it's red hot, don't burn yourself, don't get your hands in there. And if in doubt, leave it in less than you think it should be, because if you make it too dark, you can't undo it. If it's too light, you can always dunk it back in. You can always go buy another thing of dye, but you really don't want to make it a more intense color than you think it should be. In this case, we just want the slightest hint of blue. Try to replicate what we have in the color photos. Handy to have is a pair of these tongs so you can dunk it in and out from time to time. Usually it'll take only a minute or 2 in this when the temperature is right, and that's already too hot to put your hand in. I'm going to do a little test and make sure that's, yeah, it's just coming up on the temperature right now. Now what happens as you come up on a temperature where the dye normally takes, it'll all of a sudden start to turn blue. So you want to watch, you got to constantly monitor this, make sure it doesn't get darker than you want it to be. paper towels, it does it to your hands, it does it to anything this dye touches. So the trick is to get this done and get it out of the pan and clean the pan and get rid of all the dye. This stuff, once you get it on your clothes, you watch anything, it dyes everything. It's tenacious stuff. Once the water gets near that point that it's boiling, it's best to keep the thing moving around. Otherwise, you just wind up with an uneven dye. I guess circulating the dye is what really happens when you do that. You see the air bubbles stick to it and everything. In the Spitfire, I just wanted a hint of tinted glass. I don't want this to look like some drug dealer limo, you know, with the blacked out windows. And I don't want it to hide the details either, so I'm being real careful, just taking it in and out, letting it find its own depth of color, if that's the right way. It's already taken on some color. If it's too hot, what you'll see, the first thing is it'll start to curl up the material. So I'm just constantly looking at it. If I see this material starting to curl up and distort, I got to pull it out, and that means the dye is too hot. Now it's already just, what I do is I compare it to the clear Canopy, and I can see the color. Now don't forget, the color goes through two pieces of glass as you look through, and that's the reason I don't like to make it any darker than what looks dark up here. When you put it out in the sun, it'll be twice as dark because you're looking through two pieces of glass. You can see the steam coming off the pot. When you see the steam, you're not far from having the bubbles. And as soon as the bubbles start, then you want to monitor it by every second. You don't want that in boiling water. The edges of the material starting to distort now. Now that we know the temperature is too hot, I got to kill a flame. Right there, we're at the point that this material will start to distort. And you can see I got a little bit of a, you got to hold it by a clear one so you can see the difference. And that's all I want. I don't want it to be a whole lot darker than that. So now, because I want to have a backup canopy, I hope this one will go in a minute or two. You can see the steam coming off of here, in fact. I want to make two of them. Now this one will go a lot faster. The other one took about 5 minutes in the dye, but because the dye is a lot hotter now, I can't walk away from this one. I hold that up against something white, I can see the difference. See, when you're looking this way, you only look through one layer of glass, but when the plane is flying, you'll see two. You're actually looking through two layers. So you definitely, if in doubt, make it lighter than you think it should be. You'll always be safe. Okay, obviously the next thing is I have to trim all this extra plastic off. Now what I did, the other one I made up, I'm not happy with it, bellied in on the side. I just got the dye just a little bit too hot. So again, I talked to Dave Midgley, of course always good to have the input from other people. He called while I was dyeing these canopies, and one of the things he suggested, and I'm going to give it a try, is he says just let the dye sit. Now I'm letting it cool off. Let it sit overnight and just put a canopy in overnight in room temperature. So we'll see how that works, but we'll get back to this tomorrow. I'm just letting it cool off now. Now these scissors, I don't know what you call these. I happen to have these in my collection of stuff. They have a blunt point. These seem to be real handy for trimming a canopy. These scissors here, you never seem to be able to get in the corners or the edges with. These are real handy for this kind of trimming. And then I'll get the final little bit with a Dremel sanding drum. You can see, I think I got the tint just about right here. You can see how much I have to take off here, but I've been doing it in little slivers. I want that front piece to just drop right down.
You mean, here comes the moving out.
Get a rough alignment here, the same way we put the block on the back. If I just hold this up over here, it's going to give me a rough idea where I have to Dremel away to. Whoop, I slipped on that one. Now obviously I just want to go up to the line, check it, back to the line, check it a couple of times. You can see I got just a little more to take off. Again, sheetrock work. Just take a little more off the front. Still need a little bit more. Just 1/64 more. A little sliver off of this side, and I think we'll have it. Problem. I have a little bit of, I don't know if you can see it, a little bit of a crack up here in this piece of plastic, so for sure this is now a prototype. Again, to get this off, at least for now. Yeah, sure. Little cracks right under my finger, and I don't know what that's from, a chemical reaction to the glue or whatever. Good thing I have extra canopies. But anyway, I noticed that this basic part of it is going to work, so I want to make up a good one now. I'll just repeat this all off camera and come up with one that doesn't have cracks and use this for doing my testing. This is why I never erase the tape. If you think with people that do this kind of stuff, they just get it right on the first shot, yeah, well, good luck. I don't think so. But anyway, you may have the confidence knowing how much trouble I've had to, I wish I could figure out why that cracked. That's really got me. But anyway, maybe Midgley will know. I'll give Midgley a call. It seems like right by the wire, it cracked. That's very strange. I'll try making this part over again. I think I have one or two of these left, so. But this is how you learn. If you could learn some very easy way, you know, if you could just go to the library and find out, yeah, it would be nice. But obviously, that's not one of the possibilities. Now what I'm going to try with this one, and I'm pushing my luck here a little bit, I tacked that piece of wire in with some thin CA. I mixed up some black dye into 5-minute epoxy here. Again, I really don't know the chemical reason, if that's the reason. If anybody out there does know, hey, let me know. Pass it on. So I want to take this epoxy and fill in this ridge if I can. But of course, always holding it in a down position here. You just don't want to get that. And it may be that this thick CA that I have is probably too old. Maybe that's part of it. Anyway, it'll be interesting to research that out and find that out. Every time you think you know it all, up comes another monster. Well, I'll tell you one thing, this Scotch tape is unbelievable to try to get off. It comes off, you got to remember not to put this on anything with near paint. Pulls everything right off. The canopy back, I'm going to work this fillet area in a little more. Get this as smooth as I can and then get one more coat of epoxy around there. Build up a little bit of an edge, a little fillet there. Kind of like the way that looked. And I guess as far as looking at, I was fooling around looking at the magazines to see what it would look like from the side view. I guess it does look as realistic, or maybe even a little better than I thought it would. So anyway, next step is I want to get all this stuff sanded out. And this was a little test. I mixed up some milled fibers with some 5-minute epoxy. I want to get the sanding blocks out and get this all blended in before I go on to the next step on the canopy. One thing that's a pain in the neck about the white ink, it tends to clog up more than black ink. You have to kind of keep the pens moving. And a suggestion is if you're using white ink and you get a day that you're not going to use the pen, just go and use the pen. Write on some paper for a little bit. In fact, this one's going to need a little bit of a jump start here in a minute. Also, keeping the pens filled with ink seems worthwhile. It seems like as long as you use them a little bit every day, they go for a long time. This is where you wish you really had good eyes, too. I wish I didn't need all these 15 pair of glasses that I have. Really like a rivet, really kind of neat, in fact. It's amazing, every little detail you add to it from this point on, it really starts to come alive. Can't wait to get this slider gizmo made. I'm still trying to go over in my mind exactly how I'd like to do it. If I remember right, Keith had a little railroad track, a little HO or a N-gauge railroad track. That worked well. Oh, 32 degrees outside. Then I know I'm dead. Whenever you try to paint outside and that pond is frozen, really difficult. It almost guarantees you're going to have some kind of crazy thing happen with the paint, that it doesn't dry on time or something like that. So I've kind of abandoned that idea. I'm going to try to paint inside today. I don't know. I usually have, and this is really important stuff to understand. When I can paint outside, it changes the whole scope of what I can do for the day. So part of my time management now, one of the things I really want to do, and maybe this is what I'll work on today, I have these old canopies that Midgley sent me. And by the way, there's a box over there with a bunch of stuff from Midgley. I got to see what's in that box. These are canopies he used to test the mold. They're made out of real thin material. We've had these for a long time. And what I want to do is make a little piece of tape to separate. See, I was originally going to make this with tin foil, make a piece, cover this. Now it's more difficult. You look at it and you think, oh, gee, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, because I want to get the tape on the inside so I can paint right up to the edge here. And I want to kind of confine this paint to where the canopy is going to end. And this really is something that I've tried to think of an easier way of doing, but I haven't come up with a better way. So what I'm going to try to do is use part of this canopy, cut a piece off, and reverse the tape somehow, so that while I'm spraying the plane, this doesn't get paint inside. I don't want to pull the tape up and find out that there's all silver paint or whatever in there. And she's ready for a coat of silver, there's no doubt about that. And I'll probably try to come up with some way. I'll cover up the wheel with some tape, and maybe I can even shoot some silver on this today. Dave, what I've been asking Dave to do is, as he makes the canopies, I've been asking him to shoot some footage up at the vacuum machine, so that the people following through on a video can get an idea of what actually is the operations that go into making a custom canopy. And again, the door that opens up to, if you can't come up with, if you want to make a certain plane and you can't come up with a canopy, well, you can try to look through that box. I got about 100 or something canopies in, and get one that comes close. But something like this, you really want to have the exact, at least I do anyway, you want to have the exact canopy. So you have to go through some kind of a procedure of making a mold. Well, if you know what's involved and what the steps are, I think you have a real good chance of doing it. So what I'm going to do right now is put this little, it's only about 5 minutes of footage that Dave sent up. I think this will be a big help helping anybody understand what we've gone through and what Dave's done to make these canopies.
This on video?
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
You narrating?
No, I think you can though.
You should be narrating. Angie, say hi to Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
See, anyone can do this, but Angie's a super expert. You guys wanted to see Spitfire canopies made, now you've seen it. Don't show them the bottom, now you gotta take it out. Got more film. The mold is made from a product called Procast 20. It's a product that's made by Ciba Geigy Corporation. It's just a two-part casting resin. Anything like that will work. We poured that out of the rubber mold. I think you've already seen video of that. Now, you guys have all seen this before. Basically, she's going to heat the film, wait for it to go into the melt, and she's going to drop the clamp frame that holds the film over the mold and pull a vacuum on it, and you'll start to see it. You'll see it form within about 1.5 to 2 seconds. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to blow it off and cool it. And that finishes the part. Pops out. You just take it. One more time for all you guys that didn't get it the first time. It heats up. Film's melting. There it goes. Say hi to the world, Angela. Some of the creatures we have working here. This guy right here, Bob Gagnon, he's the president of the Minoxidil fan club. For those of you guys that haven't seen what we've become in the last year when I took videos of this place, we had about 15 people working here. Now there's about 33. This is only half of our manufacturing space. We own the building next door. We've grown to the point where we're literally trying to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, and we're getting ready to move. There are people everywhere here now. They're just everywhere. You can't move without bumping into somebody.
There it is.
You did it.
There it is.
I didn't think that was going to be a big decision.
Windy. There it is.
Wow.
And that is fantastic. Here we go.
I need you to start reading numbers off to me, and then we put the points down. Hey guys.
Check it out, Mo.